because we are just starting the recording, one of the great things about doing this as a recorded event is that we have the opportunity to share it not only with those of you who are able to join us live tonight, but with people through the shared recording later. So I'll backtrack on just a tiny bit of what I've already covered, which is this is the second of a series of online events that we are doing here in the Bay Area. The first one was at the end of 2018, focusing on conscious leadership. And tonight we're going to be focusing on stakeholder integration. All of our events are in one way or another focused on and connected to the 4 tenets of conscious capitalism, which are, as you heard a couple already, one is conscious leadership that we talked about last time. A second is stakeholder integration that we'll be talking about tonight. We also have conscious culture, which is one of the tenets. And then the fourth is higher purpose. So all of our events, all of our conversation is connected to these 4 tenets. And tonight we're thrilled to have the opportunity to drill down specifically in the area of stakeholder integration as our topic for tonight. So let's see, I'm going to go right into introducing our guest tonight. I told you that we have Chris Willis, who has joined us from Texas, from Interstate Battery. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Chris before we get into the conversation about the specific work that they have done in the area of stakeholder integration. I'll read a little bit from his bio and then share a little bit personally as well. Chris Willis is the Vice President of the Talent Group and a Chief Legal Officer at Interstate Battery. He joined Interstate in 2005, and he has since served as the Director of Legal Affairs, Director of Human Resources, and General Counsel for the company. He oversees all enterprise legal matters, human resources, company culture, and internal communications. He also harbors a passion for enriching the lives of others, and his devotion to team member growth and development has helped shape the careers of hundreds of people at Interstate. His 8th value is relationships with God, family, and others. In 2008, he worked to create the Interstate President's Intensive Leadership Orientation Team, or PILOT for short, which all of you who love a good anagram will love. This program serves to assist in the growth and development of the company's emerging leaders. Since then, he's remained focused on mentoring, leadership development, and values training, working to ensure opportunities for growth and development are available to all who wish to pursue them within the culture at Interstate. And I would just add personally, I just in the last couple of weeks have had the chance to get to know Chris a little bit. And he, just by being willing to be here tonight, shows that he's really living into these tenets of conscious capitalism. And in addition to that, really shows his generosity. He was super fun to work with getting ready for tonight, and I know you're going to enjoy hearing from him. So Chris, thank you so much for joining us. We're thrilled to have you here, and welcome.
Thank you very much, Robert. I want to start with some gratitude. First, for you guys, for the community, online, wherever you are, wherever you're in the Bay Area, or if you're around the world, or wherever you might be. We have a pretty vibrant conscious capitalism community here in Dallas. And we haven't done this yet, so I'm pretty excited to have this shared and to try to do this also through the Dallas chapter. And I want to go back and listen to your conscious leadership program, because that's something I'm, as you can imagine from my bio, extremely passionate about. The other thing, gratitude I want to share is for Jennifer Werschauer, who is on the call. Jennifer works for Cliff Bar in the Bay Area, and she was one of the founding members and really the driving force of the founding of the Dallas chapter of Conscious Capitalism. She was Interstate's culture ambassador and did a lot of amazing things, which I'm going to share some of which tonight, and I'm also going to potentially call on Jennifer to speak into this. So Jennifer, thank you for being here, and thank you for what you've done, and we miss you. I also want to ask that you guys excuse. So I've got quite a Southern accent that I picked up in Louisiana. So if you have questions, please, I can see the chat, raise your hand or ask them later. If you don't understand anything, Robert, feel free to interrupt me. Because it's, despite being gone from Louisiana for 30 years, it's stuck with me. So please feel free to jump into the conversation and say, hey, what did you mean by that? Or what's up with that?
Well, I just did some work with a client recently in Lafayette, Louisiana, so I may be the perfect person to be your translator. Who knows?
You might be. That's real Louisiana, for sure.
Yeah, I got a lesson in culinary arts from coming from California that was really, really enlightening. So yeah, and we're thrilled to have Jennifer with us as well. And that relationship really points out not only the commitment that Interstate has to this work and this conversation and really living the principles of conscious capitalism, but I also think is a good reminder that Interstate has been a great supporter of conscious capitalism. I know you guys have been a sponsor on several levels of the movement and the conversation that we're in. So gratitude right back at you for that as well. So with that in mind, can we go back and can you give us a little bit of a history lesson in terms of how did Interstate and you in particular get connected to this conversation about conscious capitalism before we really drill down on stakeholder integration? Just in general, how did Interstate come to be part of this conversation about conscious capitalism?
Perfect. So how about I start with a little bit about us? So for those who may not know us, and then I'll go into the story, which Jennifer was very much a part of this. But so Interstate Batteries is a $2 billion sales revenue company, privately held. We're 67 years old. We have approximately 1,500 team members. With 1,500 team members, and we are the #1 replacement battery. So not a tremendously sexy industry, but if you have a battery that has died, if a battery's died in your car, generally if your car is over 3 years old and a battery has died, you likely have ours. Whether it says Toyota on it or Nissan or GM or a Costco or Firestone, it's likely an Interstate battery, or it could be labeled Interstate Batteries. We're privately held, which we can get into later and how that really helps with the stakeholder model. And we're also 48% owned by a large public company as well. Our current CEO is the son of the owner. His name's Scott Miller, who's a big part of the journey for us. We're a purpose-driven company. We've always been a purpose-driven company, but we really didn't understand how mission and purpose-driven we really were until we got involved in conscious capitalism, and our values, which I may talk about, are part of everything that we do, also influenced by conscious capitalism. So the way we got involved with conscious capitalism was Rand Stagen, who has Stagen Leadership Institute in Dallas, developed a reputation around North Texas as being a premier leadership institute. By happenstance, I went to college with him at SMU in the 80s, but we had lost touch over the, say, 20 years since we both graduated. Rand and I had breakfast. Again, I'd heard something about his program, which is Rand's been on the board of the Conscious Capitalism, the international organization, for a number of years, and also hosts a CEO Summit in Austin. Rand and I spoke, and actually turned us down to do business because he just didn't feel like we were ready to embrace conscious capitalism, which was interesting, and he was right. So after Scott Miller became the CEO, we sat down with Rand, and Scott was connected with Southwest, another conscious company, Southwest Airlines, and it was impacted by Colleen Barrett, who was the co-CEO or the president at the time, and a book that she created, a book she wrote called Lead with Love, which was influential to Scott. When we got together with Rand gave us, as we walked out of the meeting, Forms of Endearment, which is Raj Sisodia's book that preceded Conscious Capitalism. Scott and I read the book and absolutely loved it. One of the suggestions that Rand had that was also part of, I don't know if it was part of the book, but part of best practice was to have someone specifically responsible for culture. We had, I don't think she was an intern at that time, she had joined us, but Jennifer, who's on the call, was put in charge, or was hired as a culture ambassador. She visited probably 37 to 40 companies to study culture. And all the while, we're connecting with Rand about conscious capitalism and what that means. Again, the book was not out yet, but Forms of Endearment was our guide. So probably 6 months from that period, we hired Stagen. We also hired the Purpose Institute, which is based in Austin, which is Haley Rushing and Roy Spence. Roy Spence is of GSD&M. You guys may or may not be as big of a deal for you guys, but he coined the term he coined the campaign, "Don't Mess with Texas." He did all Southwest campaigns, advertising campaign, but a pretty renowned guy in advertising. And then we connected with SMU to articulate our purpose and our values. So we did a lot of work creating a foundation of purpose and values. While this is going on, Conscious Capitalism, Mackey's book, comes out, and the tenets are the tenets are articulated. Although I think they had a run at them. There's another very influential company to us. What for us was Studio Movie Grill. Brian Schultz, who is the CEO of Studio Movie Grill, was on the Conscious Capitalism board, and a friend, and just down the street from us actually pulled us into conscious capitalism even before we got the book and started working through it. So we articulate our purpose and values with Jennifer, working on that. What we determined was we were always a purpose-driven company that acted consistent with the tenets of conscious capitalism, but we didn't know it, and we didn't have a community to be part of. This is something we can get into later. Is our purpose is to glorify God and enrich lives. And that's what, through the surveys, as we determined to articulate what our purpose was, we surveyed all of our stakeholders. We had approximately 3,400 inputs, plus a number of focus groups, interviews with the leadership, but also many of our stakeholders that we'll talk about as part of the stakeholder model. So we started with a foundation of purpose and values, and then we started working through the books. Conscious leadership is something that's a huge focus for right now that we could talk about later, but we started working through the book and other influential books around conscious capitalism. The other thing is we also have a pretty great community in Texas. From a conscious capitalism perspective, we have Kip Tyndall from Container Store, Steve Roush, who is mentioned in the book a number of times, is part of the Stagen Leadership Academy. John Mackey also is heavily involved and wrote the book. So we had opportunities to stoke the fires of conscious capitalism. Lastly, our introduction around conscious capitalism was our CEO. As soon as he brought on his first leadership team, as soon as he became the CEO, we flew out to San Francisco, to your area, to go to our first Conscious Capitalism annual summit, and were blown away by the community. So that's how we got connected. I think Jennifer was part of all of that. Jennifer, anything else? Did I miss anything there?
Hey, Chris.
Hey, Jennifer.
No, that's super good recap. I would just add that I really give a lot of credit to the leaders of the company, particularly Chris, you, and Scott as the CEO, giving someone like me at the time, I think I was 24. I had been working in operations, helping to open new retail locations. And he gave me, it was close to a year to research all of those 30 to 40 companies that we really learned a ton from. And those companies were so gracious with what they had learned, what their challenges were, and what their best practices were, that we put together a plan on how to articulate our purpose, values, and then infuse those into the business with the benefits of having all of that learning from those companies before we even started. So it's just a huge nod to like the leadership of the company thinking to do that first.
Well, and what you were saying, I didn't realize, and this should have been part of our promotion of this call, I guess, is that Interstate was literally on board with conscious capitalism before the book even came out. So you talk about kind of being in on the ground floor. I think you're talking about the definition of that. And I had made a note in terms of what you were saying about the company is not necessarily what you would think of when, you know, in terms of being really sexy. But well, I was going to point back to that as it doesn't matter. This whole conversation about conscious capitalism doesn't necessarily have to be the most exciting, cutting edge tech company or something like that. It applies just as well to the nuts and bolts, nitty gritty kind of companies. And we actually had a comment come through on our chat box from Chris Schaefer, who said batteries are very sexy when the power goes out. So you might not want to underestimate just how sexy those batteries can be when we really need them. So thank you for that. And the history is really compelling because, again, you guys have been involved in this conversation, and your story also begins to illustrate what we'll get into with what you've done in the area of stakeholder integration, where you're not just in the conversation, but you're really implementing, you're really putting this into action, which is obviously where we really make a difference. So when it comes to stakeholder integration, and I know, Chris, you had sent us over your Win6 model, and you had also sent me some photographs. So if we want to take a look at any of that, just let me know. But I'd love to have you explain a little bit about what Interstate has done specifically in this area of the one tenet that we're focusing on tonight, which is stakeholder integration. And again, if you want me to screen share and bring up any of those photographs or the diagram, just let me know.
So why don't you bring that up with our Win6, the original Win6 picture that I think you had before that maybe came from the Conscious Capitalism Conference.
Okay, so here's our second technology test of the night. So we're going to go to screen share, and we're going to go to PowerPoint here. And you and Steve are going to let me know.
There it is. Perfect.
There it is. And let me just bring it up to full screen for you. So there's the overall diagram. I don't know if that's a poster or what have you, but we also have, if we want to zero in on the actual 6 components, we can do that as well. So you let me know what works best.
That's perfect. Why don't we start with, so this, let me explain this poster, and then I'm going to go back to the story which Jennifer was very involved in and recount kind of how this got started. So this is a poster from the annual conference, Conscious Capitalism Conference, which was in Dallas this last April. They acknowledged probably 15 local companies that were involved in conscious capitalism, and they gave their purpose and then how they were infused the stakeholder model. So that's our purpose, which we mentioned there, and then if we would go to the stakeholder model, if you would blow that up again, we've got the Win6. So the way this came about, and Jennifer, I don't know if you remember this, but Scott started talking about Win6 before he even became the CEO. So he was the president of a business unit, of our retail business unit, and he gave a presentation at the conference for those groups about how all stakeholders should win. And we need to be considerate of all our stakeholders. So he started that, and this is before the book came out, I believe. And we studied it, and we thought, well, that was interesting. And the current CEO at the time thought it was very interesting, but he didn't push on it much because I think at that point he knew he was going to be retiring and moving on. So Scott started with Win6 before even becoming the CEO. And then when he became the CEO, he had us examine who are our stakeholders. As a company, what are our major stakeholders? He was, by that point, the Conscious Capitalism book had come out, and we was influenced by the Win6 model, and that's where he got the term, the Win6 model from the Conscious Capitalism book. So we went through an exercise of looking at who ours were. We didn't just take directly from the book who the stakeholders. Now, most of them were similar, but we did an evaluation as a leadership team is who they really were. So clearly, our team members, that was an easy one. When you're about enriching lives, your team members are a pretty easy one. The next really major stakeholder for us, which is different from the book, were our partners. So Interstate Batteries is really a marketing and distribution company. So we don't manufacture our batteries. Johnson Controls, our 48% owner, manufactures the vast majority of our batteries, but we go to market through primarily independent distributors. And we were founded on the idea that the mom and pop distributor with a warehouse along this interstate system that Eisenhower had just announced was happening. And our founder, John Searcy, and then our current owner, Norm Miller, part of their job early was go out and set up these distributors. And the distributors were, again, often people that had worked in gas stations or small business owners. The distributor model and the individual distributor had been part of our heritage for years and years. We have some 3-generation distributorship families. So it was a family type model. So our distributors and how they interacted with our corporate office were a huge deal. So they were a major stakeholder of ours, including, and it also included, we have a retail side, which Jennifer worked in, the franchise group, or we call it the all battery model. So our partners were our distributors and our franchisees. There are approximately, at that time, there were approximately 250 of those across North America, Central and South America. So that was our next major stakeholder. Customers, which is also in the book, and that's kind of a no-brainer, was a stakeholder of ours, making sure we're serving our customer. Vendors. So in the book, I believe Mackie talks about his suppliers, but we called them vendors because it was much more than our primary supplier, Johnson Controls, which we can talk about in a minute as well, but much more than just the supplier of our batteries, or as Mackie talks about in the book, supplier to Whole Foods. We had vendors, but we had a primary supplier, and then we had another multiple suppliers from around the world, including Chinese companies, smaller U.S. companies, and we included our service suppliers as well, from our professional service, from our accounting, our legal, those kind of groups. Community was our 5th stakeholder, and I'll come back to order, which is an interesting discussion. By community, everyone outside of the other stakeholders that we interacted with, including the environment and governmental entities and the communities with which our distributors are in. So we have a chaplains department that we give away 10% of our net profits to primarily Christian charities, but other charities. We saw that as community as well, and that's all over the world. So the community was a pretty broad group for us, and again, a little different from the book. And lastly, shareholders, which is similar to the book. We really have 2 primary shareholders, which is the owner of the company, primary owner of the company, Norm Miller, Scott's dad, and Johnson Controls. I can tell you that is probably the shareholder, the stakeholder that gets the least attention of all of them. And we can talk about how we sorted through our stakeholders and how we dealt with them. But that was the Win-6 model from us. And one last thing on it is we believed it was a mindset that any major decision that we make, or really any decision, particularly major decisions, that we wanted to consider these 6 stakeholders, and hopefully they all win within that decision.
So,
yeah, and if
Jennifer. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Yeah, I just would love to add how that actually looked in real life. Was this image is posted in the boardroom at Interstate Batteries, and when really serious decisions were being made around that boardroom table, that was on the wall, and Scott and others on his leadership team used to say, okay, we're about to make this decision, let's take it around the circle. And I just remember that phrasing being used a lot. You know, Win-6 too, but it's just the fact that they focused on each stakeholder and went around the circle to make sure they remembered and at least talked about each one. It was pretty cool.
Well, and Chris, do you want to go through and show the photos that you sent to me and
sure. So let me
what Jennifer's talking about, because I'm sure people are wondering, like, so you developed this model, and it gives us the opportunity to talk a little bit about how it's implemented, who it's shared with within the organization and even outside the organization, and how. So I don't know if I have these photos in here in the order that you would like to show them, but it starts at the front desk here, I guess, when people first walk in, and what they're seeing. in terms of the graphics that are there.
Yeah, so let me talk about that, and I think this is a good order. So this is Adelaide, our receptionist, who is really the first intro and probably our most important ambassador to our culture. When you walk in, we were very intentional. Around this time Scott became CEO, we redid our corporate offices, and what we wanted people to feel the culture as soon as they got out of the elevator on the 10th floor. And so you get off the elevator and you see Interstate batteries, and behind you see our values. You see a picture and then the actual value behind Adelaide. And if you look to the left, you see our purpose. So as soon as you walk in, you feel it. So if you go to the next slide, I'll tell you a little bit more about that. Okay, keep going. Let's go. Keep going. We'll go to the one that, Jennifer, this is something you haven't seen, but keep going. We'll go to the one more.
The one more, then we're going to have to go backwards.
There we go.
There we go. Okay, perfect.
Okay. So you walk in, so Adelaide's to your right. You walk into the corporate office, and this is what you see and hopefully feel. If you look up to the top, at the top of the picture, you see our purpose, which is kind of it's on the left there. Then you see our values with descriptors of the values in the circle, kind of green, white on green. But from a stakeholder integration perspective, what you see above the window are pictures of our stakeholders, of our 6 stakeholders. So there are more than 6 pictures there, but you see the representation is this is of those stakeholders that are represented. So you got team members, you got our customers there, you've got the environment is another. You do have a NASCAR team that we talk about. So we try to depict or at least create conversations about our stakeholder model as soon as you walk in. So you feel our purpose and our values, and you feel the stakeholder model. So if you'll go back, this is something new. If you go back one slide, so this is on the wall on our legal and finance area.
Sorry, I'm going to go back to that.
Stakeholder model, that's fine. This is fine. And then there on each side of it, so this is about a 10 foot by 30 foot picture that you walk by, at least legal and finance walk by this every day. And then we do have this Win6 model in our boardroom and also in multiple conference rooms and all over the building. And then this picture that on either side of the Win6 is further detail about the stakeholder, about our values and the stakeholder model.
So there's 3 photos here that then cover that entire wall. The Win6 model is in the middle, and it looks like the next one people will see is actually to the right, drilling down into that. And then the next
one. Vendors is explaining who the stakeholders are. Vendors, communities, you see how we explain who the community is.
Okay. And then the next one is over on the left-hand side of the diagram, looking at customers, team members, and partners.
That's right. So our hope is that any team member, this is also explained during orientation, any team member, and we have a purpose and values day where we explain the Win6 stakeholder model. Any team member that joins us, we hope, understands what Win6 thinking is and what the stakeholder model is. So it's all over the home office, and then hopefully in our distributorships they have representations of our values and also the stakeholder model.
And can you speak a little bit more to the difference? Like you said, you know, there's 6 categories in the book about stakeholder integration, and then you've got 6 as well, but they don't necessarily line up. You clearly, well, part of the reason we know now is the book wasn't even out yet when you guys were doing this, but you haven't just kind of copy and pasted the book. You've really gone in and made sure that this is in alignment with your particular business and your stakeholders. Can you talk a little bit about kind of customizing it for Interstate?
Sure, and I may ask Jennifer to help refresh my memory as well. So we saw the stakeholder model as you first had to identify who your stakeholders were. I guess it was Freeman who we saw speak. So the book came out, I think, right as we went to the San Francisco, as we attended the San Francisco conference. I think it came out right then. So a lot of this work was done before. Ed Freeman influenced it, Firms of Endearment, then also Rand Stagen, Kip Tyndall, and others. But we didn't really look at it as what Whole Foods stakeholders were the same stakeholders as we had. So we looked at it as really who were our stakeholders? Who were the most integral people to the success and the fulfillment of our purpose? And clearly, again, our team members are right there. Our partners were hugely important to that and just part of our heritage. Customers, without a doubt, again, Johnson Controls as a supplier, they were all there. The other thing to know is whenever we were doing this, we were considering this around the same time we were working to articulate our purpose. So when we did the purpose surveying work, we reached out to all of our stakeholders groups. We surveyed all of the stakeholders to get what their view of why Interstate existed and what its purpose was. Jennifer, what did I miss there?
I think that's where the conversation really started, was when we needed to interview people. It was like, wait, who has a stake in what we do? And that's how it all kind of came together. You got it.
Well, and for people, I know we may have people who are listening in on this, either live or on the recording, who are very familiar and very steeped deeply in the conversation about conscious capitalism. We also may have people who are very new. For those people who really, have gone through it with a fine-tooth comb, they may see something that's kind of missing in your six, but I just want to shine a light on the fact that you already mentioned it, and based on what I've learned about Interstate, it is really an important element for you, and that's the environment. So one, you specifically mentioned that you see the environment component fitting into what you call community, but can you also speak to the battery recycling that Interstate?
Yeah, so let's talk about the environment, because the environment was a big discussion for us, and we felt like that that the environment was a stakeholder without a doubt. So Interstate Batteries, so our colors, as you can probably see, are primarily green, but we feel like we've been a green company, and we also, is consistent with our purpose around glorifying God. We believe that the environment is a major stakeholder, and it always has been. So what does that look like for us in action? So we recycle 26 million batteries. We sell 19 million batteries a year. So we recycle well more than we sell, and that's partly a product of the model, but also we believe is consistent with our purpose. I think Jennifer was with us when there was an industry standard plastic coating around all batteries that we took out at a significant expense. We took out of the environment. We have a state-of-the-art environmental and health and safety group. We have this thing called the Green Standard that nobody can touch in the battery industry. And we also handle a very toxic chemical, lead. So we are the only group that handles every single battery that we sell and then bring back out of the environment. So it's an important thing to us. We're not where we want to be on a lot of things that we can talk about, and we want to take questions. We'd like to be an all gas, or at least as carbon neutral as we possibly can as a company, but we're not there yet. The other thing to know is this absolutely comes from our purpose. We believe that God created the world, and we need to steward that world well. So you can be an old line industrial company and deeply care about the environment like we do. And if you look at any of our ads, so we have several environmentally friendly ads. The other thing that's interesting is we don't promote the fact. Some of us believe maybe we should, but automotive batteries are one of the most recycled products on the planet. Around 98% of an automotive battery is recycled. Now, part of that is by regulation because they handle lead, but there are advertisements out for, I think Energizer's got one that says 7% of this battery is recycled with a green battery. Automotive batteries truly are one of the most green products on the planet. So the environment is and always was a big deal for us, but we see it as part of our communities because we feel like we have an obligation to communities as a whole as well.
So have you found now, obviously based on what you're saying and what the company's actually doing, you're really living into that conversation. You're not just talking about it, you're putting action behind it, and really compelling action. Do you find that your connection to conscious capitalism helps you be positioned and be viewed in that light of really caring about the environment, when normally a battery company, I would think, would not by default be viewed that way? Does your involvement with conscious capitalism and being part of that conversation help in that arena?
So it does. I think having a community to have these kind of discussions. So the other thing is we're very active in the CEO Summit, which happens in Austin, and it's like there are people, and there are a lot of different. So there are banks that are there. There are professional service firms. So I'd say it's just helpful with being part of a community. I don't know that it's much of a driving factor as it is this community. There's momentum within a community. And we have a lot of great leaders, again, like Mackie and Kip Tyndall that are right there, and Brian Schultz, a studio movie girl, that helped the momentum going. But one of the taglines that evolved as we came up with our purpose, there was a tagline that says it's who we are. And you'll see it when you come into our office. You'll see a thumbprint with our values on it that says it's who we are. Conscious capitalism is who we are. And again, I think it's driven by our purpose. So
awesome.
Community is probably that creates some momentum for what we've got with conscious capitalism. And that's the other thing. It's really great. So I think there's lots of opportunities for you guys in California. I know, again, visiting Cliff Bar and Jennifer, there's an amazing community. And once you get the momentum going with the community, which the Dallas chapter and the Conscious Capitalism annual conference has happened last year, I think was the largest one they'd ever had. Once you get the momentum around community, you can do amazing things and have a huge impact, which I forgot to mention the gratitude. It matters what we're doing, what you guys are doing, embracing conscious capitalism. If you're living into it, it matters and it makes a difference in people's lives, without a doubt.
Good. Thank you. So one other thing, when we look at what's been accomplished over the years, and again, being involved from the very beginning, we look back on this and we see these amazing photos, and the lobby looks beautiful and all that. But there's an expression called, it takes 20 years to create an overnight success. And I would love to hear from you about some of the hard work and maybe some of the challenges that really went into getting to this point. Were there challenges and obstacles along the way to taking the stakeholder integration model and not only developing it, but fully implementing it the way you have?
So I'll start with original challenges around conscious capitalism, then I'll move to stakeholder. Early challenges to conscious capitalism, and Jennifer will remember this, we had a few executives after the San Francisco conference quit. They were just like, this is not what we want to be involved in, this is not us, and we're out. And that was painful, and we continued forward. From a stakeholder integration perspective, from a stakeholder model perspective, here's what we struggled with early. So once you determine who your major stakeholders are, and how you deal with considering how they all win, what you bump into is, well, who wins the most where, and prioritizing, and that gets difficult. I think I saw in Mackie's in conscious capitalism, he talks about how the customer was their primary stakeholder. I don't know that we have primary, or we never sorted out which are the primary stakeholders. I think the shareholders are probably the last stakeholder, and we're very unique in that, I believe, which if you're a private company, that works well. But so then sorting out who wins, and as Jennifer mentioned earlier, we would say take it around the wheel, take it around the Win6 wheel, sorting out what decisions make the most sense for each stakeholder. We had a lot of disagreement early, particularly as how we interacted with our primary supplier, Johnson Controls. how we interacted with our team members. So during this not long, at one point we had a reduction in force, and how do you care? How is that a win for somebody who doesn't work for you? Values, having a strong set of values helps you sort through those items. But we would argue, okay, well, what's most important? So again, it's not the shareholders. The shareholders are not pushing us, which I think is unique. Shareholders are not pushing us for profits. Profits are not what we're about. We're about glorifying God and enriching lives. So then as you take it around the wheel, as Jennifer mentioned, this is the biggest challenge I think we've bumped into, is when you have stakeholders that have different philosophies or values alignment to you. Again, Johnson Controls is a publicly owned company that is often about maximizing profits. They're not a conscious capitalism company. They're a major stakeholder of ours. So how do we work with them? Another thing that we bumped into is we went into China and took this model into China. We opened about 4 years ago in China. We had ultimately closed our Chinese operation because there was we didn't have values alignment with some of our distributors in China, and it was going to be really difficult for us to stay true to our values and do business there. So you bump into stakeholders that have different vision, that have different interests and visions as to what the way you should participate with them. The zero-sum game, when you have stakeholders that see things as a zero-sum game or a win-lose, that makes it more difficult. I think in the book, Mackie talks about how a lot of his stakeholders are his suppliers who absolutely want to do the right thing and do business with us. With us, it was a little bit more complicated, particularly when it came to also our distributors. Our major supplier and our distributors made it difficult. What we found is if those stakeholders are values aligned with us, then it works. If they're not values aligned, then we have bumps.
Wow. So thank you for that. And I personally am really struck by the scope of those obstacles, because when you're talking about, getting alignment with a company like Johnson Controls and making a decision about whether your values can align with working in China and that incredibly difficult decisions you're faced with, it would be really easy to step back and not stay on this path. So it's really impressive that you have. And kind of the other side of that coin, I asked you about challenges. And again, I think this is really compelling because you've been at this for so long, but what about some of the benefits that you've seen? What have been the greatest benefits, in your opinion, to Interstate of really staying the course and continuing to develop and implement the conscious capitalism approach?
So I think you create high trust, which again then creates speed to market. So our team members, our engagement scores for our team members, we do a lot of surveying, which Jennifer started. Actually, we do a lot of surveying of our team members, and we have extremely engaged team members. And we will, if our CEO says we want to take that hill, our team members will go do it, whatever it might be. So high engagement for our team members. The same thing with our distributors, our other stakeholders, distributors and partners. The ones that are values aligned, which are most, will do anything. They will scale mountains, swim through swamps, whatever it takes to get a better to support our purpose and support the company. Same thing with suppliers. So we had one supplier that we kept out of bankruptcy by loaning them money and working with them. Tremendous loyalty and high trust. Suppliers, team members. From an environmental perspective, right? Well, sorry. The other thing is part of our success is we do really, really well in the communities because we work with those stakeholders in the communities, or we are heavily involved in communities. And then we have tremendous customer loyalty because the way that we treat our customers. We have a no-hassle warranty system, so hopefully you guys have never had to deal with this, but if you have an issue with an Interstate battery, for the most part, you should have no trouble returning it. All of that creates great goodwill. and then ultimately sales, which is why we're the number one in the market on replacement batteries. So it's good for business. It's not always easy. And the other thing, I guess, to know is our profit margins are pretty low because we are extremely generous to our stakeholders. And if you have a shareholder stakeholder that's not what's driving them, you can do it.
And at the same time, we started off with your bio and your description of Interstate and the history. Interstate has been an incredibly successful company on a financial basis. True?
We've been profitable since our founding, and giving back is it's not all about profit. So that goes
right.
Like the part of conscious capitalism. So we are absolutely capitalist, but profit is not what drives us.
Right. And we like to, in our group, we like to focus a lot on implementation, and you've shared a lot in that arena. We also always like to make sure that we remember that it is conscious capitalism. And part of the message is that this is not one or the other. It's not exclusive. That taking this approach and having the kind of implementation and focus on your stakeholders that you've talked about is good for the bottom line. It's good for sustainability. And I think what you've shared with us tonight really illustrates that.
Well, it's good for us. Again, we're about glorifying God and enriching lives. We believe capitalism has enriched more lives than any philosophy or concept in the history of the world.
Yeah.
And that we believe that, and we believe that's completely consistent with our purpose.
Awesome. So the biggest problem we have with these online events is that they seem to in some way accelerate the passage of time, because as we look at the clock, all of a sudden we're coming up against the bottom of the hour. Chris, I don't know if you have any kind of final words that you want to share with us, or any advice that you have for people who are looking to do this kind of implementation in their own company, or working with a company to try and do an implementation like this. Any final words from you before we wrap it up?
So I'll be quick, and if there are any questions, I'm very happy to answer, because I've seen a few pop up here. First, just encouragement for all of you. What you're doing absolutely matters. And then the other thing is, so we've come a long way, and it's been wonderful. And again, it makes me happy to see Jennifer's name up there. We've come a long way, and we by no means have it perfect. So don't expect that it's going to be a perfect situation. John Mackey's not perfect. The founders are not perfect. Brian Schultz is not perfect, but you strive in this community, and you can do some real good for the world.
Awesome. Well, we're deeply grateful for you being willing to take the time to share with us about your personal experience on this journey, and also what has gone on in the company at Interstate. So thank you so much for joining us. Jennifer, also thank you to you. I don't know if you have any final words that you want to add before we wrap up, but we're deeply grateful. You were like our last minute celebrity bonus guest who joined in tonight. So thank you for your contribution. Did you have anything else that you wanted to add before we wrap up?
Yeah, I'd just say, as a former Interstate Batteries team member, I really miss that company. I'm lucky to have landed at Cliff Bar, since my husband's job took us to the Bay Area, because there are a lot of similarities at Cliff Bar in terms of conscious capitalism tenets. But man, I will sing the praises of Interstate for life. And that really says something about what Chris just mentioned about trust and how team members really feel about that company.
It's funny how there's no accident to this Bay Area connection. You know, there was that San Francisco conference that you mentioned that was so integral, and then we stole Jennifer away from you. So, you know, for people listening in who aren't in the Bay Area, you got to know there's a lot going on here, right?
Yeah.
It is a really dynamic place and wonderful place to be engaged in this conversation. So again, thank you, Chris. Thank you to Jennifer. Thank you to the team members from our Bay Area chapter board who helped put this together. And most of all, thank you to the attendees who took the time out of their evening, or are taking the time out of their life, their day, to join in and listen to the recording of this. And I also want to invite Steve Haviland, who again is our board chair. And Steve, do you have anything that you want to add before we wrap up tonight?
Yeah, I do, Robert. Thanks so much. And Chris and Jennifer, thank you so much for just sharing your journey, sharing what it's taken for Interstate to really come into the full expression of their mission and purpose. And that it's so important that when you think of stakeholder orientation or integration, as we've been talking about it tonight, that it's distinct for every company. Every company is going to have a unique purpose to express that's beyond making money, which is a huge piece of what this movement and this beautiful idea and the four tenets is about. So to align that stakeholder set with the purpose of each company and with each stakeholder, how do you add value in both directions for the stakeholder, for the company, in service of the mission, is always the most challenging and wonderful part of it. And stakeholder orientation to me is so much about that everyone has a voice, that everyone's voice matters, that we move beyond zero sum, and we get into that win-win that is aligned with this being in service of the purpose. Also, these feedback and feed forward systems that they talked about, the surveys, and then taking responsibility for what you obtain from the surveys to let people know the communication plan, the progress that you're making, to be vulnerable and courageous, and to get out on the edges of the stakeholder orientation. We talked about primary, secondary. You could also look at it like inner circle, outer circle. You heard Chris talk a little bit about how environment was embedded into community, but there are really interesting aspects of stakeholder orientation that open up new dimensions like competition. How do you move from competition into what we could call cooperation with those folks, to learn together, to grow together, to realize it's just a bigger pie. It's not fighting over a piece of the pie. And then also, how do we really understand the power of even our critics? The folks, what can we learn from those that have things to say about our organization by being open-hearted and creative? So that whole context of stakeholder orientation is beautifully expressed in this call, because as the Bay Area chapter, we're also part of a stakeholder ecosystem of 40 chapters around the world that are volunteer-driven in service of this great movement and this beautiful idea of the four tenets of conscious capitalism. And so normally we would focus on local business, and this is a great opportunity to be able to lean in and showcase one of our stakeholder community members, Interstate, and the great work that they're doing to really spread that out. So I want to share with some appreciations of Chris. I want to share an appreciation for Dale Harold, the president of Interstate, and the interesting connection of his son, Drew, that brought this whole thing together, that is dating my niece Bailey, and it just happened a Christmas conversation that brought this whole thing. So when you're in your passion set, it's amazing how stakeholder orientation can happen. Jennifer was not only an amazing contribution to the movement, but to our chapter as well. When she moved here, she came into the events chair role, which Robert is sitting in, and he's standing on those very broad shoulders that Jennifer laid the foundation for. And she also just rocked out the first full-day conference that we did as a pilot with the international team that has become the collaborative full-day conference model for chapters around the world. So Jennifer, we're super grateful for you. And of course, as you mentioned, the CCBA team and volunteers and the community. And we really want to just invite you to explore this idea, this movement, this community of conscious capitalists around the world, to really lean in, to see the value it could be for you, to consider coming to local events in the Bay Area or your local chapter, wherever that is, which you can find the local chapters under the tab chapters on consciouscapitalism.org, and really learn that we are here to create that community of support, growth, and opportunity, and to inspire folks to take this beautiful idea and bring it into their lives, their businesses, to really inspire the future of work and the future of this planet that we're all in service of, both with our businesses and in how we contribute in life. So thank you guys so much for the time. Thanks for your generosity of being here. I know we're a little short for time, so if it makes sense, Robert and Chris, if you're willing, you can hang on for a couple minutes for anyone that would like, but we'll go ahead. Robert, I'm going to pass it back to you for any closing comments, and then we'll complete the recording, and just grateful for all of you being here with us tonight.
Yep. And Steve mentioned, part of what we do here in the Bay Area is live events, and people can see those events on our website, which is consciouscapitalismbayarea.org. But just so people know, we have an East Bay event February 7th. We have, let me make sure I get this right, we have a North Bay event in Petaluma that will be on February 15th. We have a South Bay event, which will be at the Stanford Linear Accelerator Center, which is super cool, on March 13th. And then we'll be having an event in San Francisco shortly after that. So lots of exciting stuff coming up, lots of ways to stay connected. And Chris, I just wanted to circle back to you and again express my personal gratitude. this was just an amazing conversation. And when I think of a battery company, I don't by default think of the genuine care that I heard from you tonight. You're clearly really living these principles, and I think we could all really hear it in your voice. And when you read a bio of someone who's got a legal and HR background, and then we hear that kind of level of just deep care and concern for all these stakeholders, it really is inspiring. So thank you very much for sharing your story and Interstate's story with us tonight. If you're able to stay on for a couple of minutes, I think we probably could allow people to type a question into the chat box. Kate's been great about kind of keeping an eye on that. Kate, did we have any questions that came in? I saw some comments scrolling by, but I didn't really see any questions. We don't want to open up all the lines because it generally creates a lot of background noise. But if people want to type a question into the chat box, I don't know, Chris, if you have a couple minutes to stay on. He's a couple hours ahead of us here on the West Coast, but we can create the opportunity for that, or we can wrap it up. So if people have to go, we understand. We are officially done. So thank you for everyone for attending. Kate, any questions coming in as I tap dance, or?
I think we've got one, just one
Okay.
coming in from Chris.
So the question is, you followed the written instruction from the books you read. Why was this an important element of creating your culture?
So we wanted to learn, right? So we had a strong culture, but we really, there's a lot of great materials. John Cotter, Keating, a number of excellent authors, again, Mackey, Sasodia, Ed Freeman. We wanted to learn. So we just reached out to what materials we could find and the individuals that we could connect with. Again, Rand Stagen and others. We really just wanted to learn. So that's how that was it. So that I don't know that there was a manual for this. Actually, Roy Spence had an excellent book around purpose as well. We followed and integrated what made sense for us, and it's worked out. That's how we did it.
Well, we live in such a fortunate time where there's so many of those kinds of resources available to us right at our fingertips through the internet and the library. So yeah, it really is an amazing time. If people are genuinely interested in engaging in this conversation, it's not difficult to find those kinds of resources. Like you're saying, it's almost like there's too many of them. Certainly.
Let me add one other thing to that, which we found, which is really cool, and if Jennifer's still on, whoever's speaking of this, what we found is conscious capitalism companies, wherever they were in the world, were super open to sharing everything that they had done. And that was amazing. So we visited Chick-fil-A. We visited, well, Jennifer visited around 30-something companies. We visited a number of companies, and everybody just opened their doors to share what they were doing. And that was refreshing and really cool.
Great.
So reach out if you know, and we host people regularly. So if you guys are in Dallas, feel free to reach out to us. We want to share. We feel it's our obligation to share everything that we're doing. And then when we have team members leave us, again, like Jennifer, we want to share all the learnings that we had. We want them to share it because we feel like it fulfills our purpose.
All right. Well, either Chris is really, really generous, or he forgot that this call is being recorded, and we have a lot of witnesses to that offer. So thank you very much for that.
We do it. We do it regularly.
Well, and I think you bring up, I'm obviously kidding, but you bring up a good point that this is a part of practicing what we preach. And my experience has been exactly the same, that there's a tremendous amount of generosity within this community, and there isn't a scarcity mentality of people kind of guarding and protecting their secrets in some way. It's called, we as a community need to do this, and we'll help each other in any way we can. One other question came through that I think is a really great one. It says, I'm curious about the executives who decided to leave after the San Francisco conference. What was it that they objected to?
So it was a different philosophy. So we are an evangelical, or our owner is an evangelical Christian. And the philosophies that were espoused, some of them made some of our executives nervous as to what was coming with this new CEO. What would it do to our corporate culture and what our corporate mission, and the openness that our CEO expressed in looking at different ways of being. It was just a little more than what I think these executives had experienced, definitely in previous leadership, and that made them nervous, and they had other opportunities, so they went. So it was a courage. So one of our values is courage. It was a courage moment for our CEO, and I think that was the essence of it. Jennifer, was that your experience of it?
Jennifer may be muted. I still see you.
Right. So that was it. Some of it was also some of the executives were not huge fans of the CEO to begin with, and this was an opportunity for them to move on because they had philosophical differences. But I do think conscious capitalism created challenges for the faith systems of some of our executives.
Well, and I love what you said about they had other opportunities that they viewed as better for them, and the level of support for them and moving on to those other opportunities and what's best for everybody. Really compelling way to approach it. So that was our final question. And I do want to honor people's time, especially you, Chris. Again, you've been very generous 2 hours later to share your time with us this evening. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. And I know this has made a really big difference for people listening live. Thank you for joining us. For people listening to the recording, thank you for joining us belatedly. And keep your eye out. We, again, will be continuing with a series of these online events. We will be exploring the other two tenets of conscious capitalism, and we have a couple of other compelling ideas on the agenda as well. So every couple of months, you'll be seeing a promotion for one of these online events. We hope you'll continue to not only join us, but share with friends and colleagues. And so thank you very much. With that, we will wrap up the call. Steve, thank you for your help. Kate, thank you for your help. And we will see you the next time we gather for one of our Conscious Capitalism Bay Area online events. Thank you so much.
Great job, Robert. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
You bet. Catch you guys soon.